Also, you were at the Refugee Center in Utica.
Yes, I was.
Speaking to them, what was your impression of Utica's Refugee Center?
You know what? It was like coming around full circle, because in 2003, I partnered with the Refugee Center for my senior thesis to conduct my senior thesis at Hamilton College.
Wow.
So back then, I was researching and doing a comparative analysis between Sudanese refugees and Bosnian refugees, and how likely they were to acculturate and assimilate to this community.
Well, look what the Bosnian population has done.
Absolutely. So for me, going back to the Refugee Center 15 years later was remarkable, because they've done such tremendous work.
Yeah.
Back then, it was just these two categories of refugees, and now they're supporting such a large population, Somalis, Afghanis. So it was just impressive to see all the work that they're doing. And I was there to educate them about what's going to happen because of potentially an influx in their cases around undocumented immigrants.
Interesting. So your parents died when you were 15, yes. And you were left. Had no clue that your Social Security number didn't work. You found out at Hamilton. Right. You became someone who was in the process of being potentially deported.
Yes.
And you had nothing. But nothing. A lot of people that really assisted you. So that's your story. She has a book coming out. I do want to just quickly get into, we see the percentages of immigrants in the United States. Mexican, Central American, 71%, Asian, 13%, South American, 6%, European and Canadian, 4%. This is the funny thing. Yeah. I don't know. I know at least 3 people who were undocumented. Basically, they stayed past their green card, and they worked, and we protected them, and they were Irish, and one was Australian. And so do we treat them differently?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because even today, there's actually an equivalent to the Mohawk Valley Refugee Center in Boston, and they focus on Irish undocumented immigrants. Yeah. So there's 16,000 undocumented Irish immigrants today in the United States. They're going through the deportation process as well, but they have the advantage of not looking physically like the undocumented immigrant that's portrayed in the media. The other thing that we don't know, and I don't think people communicate, is that, Asians are another growing undocumented immigrant population. They're actually outpacing Mexicans, in terms of the undocumented immigration growth. So yes, I would say that we treat anyone who's not brown skin and who doesn't speak Spanish differently if they're categorized within the undocumented immigrant population.
John McCain, you obviously this is he was an important person to you.
Absolutely.
Talk about how you met John McCain and how he affected your life.
Yeah, what's so incredible to me is that during his memorial, I watched all of these celebrities and important people talk about how impactful he was within their lives. And what was so great is, like me, a little person, a nobody, also could confirm that. And no one ever has to know my story, but I want to share it because he was a special man. So when I decided to go public with my case, because I was in deportation, I did not have a country. And so that meant I was stateless. So I was going to end up in a detention facility indefinitely. So I decided to go public with my case because I had no other options. And John McCain's town hall rally in 2004 in New York City was the very first time I went public with my case. I was terrified that people would hurt me, they would attack me, because I see and I read in the media how people perceive undocumented immigrants,
Yeah.
right? And so I was the first speaker at his rally. There was a Polish undocumented immigrant woman. I remember there being an Irish undocumented immigrant man, and a couple of others.
Yeah.
And so I spoke, I shared my story, and afterwards, John McCain came up to me, very unassumingly, and he said, remind me again, where are you from? And I said, I'm from DR Congo. He said, that's a very difficult place to be from.
Yeah.
And he thanked me for my courage of standing up and sharing my story and risking being scrutinized. And I just thought that was so special, considering everything he went through and his courage. It was like he's thanking me for having courage. Yeah. So it meant so much to me just to get that validation from this individual, from this white man. Whereas throughout my entire immigration journey, I was in a courtroom with white men who were telling me that I didn't exist, that I was a nobody, that I deserved to be deported. Yeah. And so then to have John McCain validate my existence and say that I had courage meant the world to me.
Pretty amazing. What a story. So how when we look at the children,
yeah,
and you hear, and a lot of we'll hear that, wow, they're taking advantage of the children. That's not really the big story. But no one, you didn't control coming to this country. How often is your story told throughout the country? Is your story somewhat typical?
Yes, it actually is, but it's not the story that the media likes to really cover, because they focus on the sensationalization of other stories, the stories of people who are crossing the border, right? And these are really important stories as well. There's stories, focusing on family separation. Those are critical stories.
Yeah.
But that's only one side of the story. The majority of the 11 million undocumented immigrants are individuals that overstayed their visas.
So they came legally.
They came legally and overstayed their visas, or their parents overstayed their visas.
Right.
The majority of undocumented immigrants are people like myself.
Your journey had been laid out before you were of age.
Yes.
I mean, your destiny you didn't have control of that. This happened to you. You were 15 years old when your mom died.
When things happen, when your parents pass away, what are you supposed to do?
Yeah.
You don't have control. So the majority of individuals are like me. They came as children. Circumstances happen. Maybe their parents didn't die, but at the end of the day, they came as children.
Yeah.
And now they're adults, and many of them, I actually know quite a number of people who started on this journey with me or were undocumented when I was undocumented. But they didn't qualify for the DREAM Act, which never got passed. They never qualified for DACA because they exceeded the age limit. And by the way, I exceeded the age limit for DACA. So I could potentially still be undocumented today and or in deportation. I'm in a detention facility today. Had it not been for a fluke, the highest immigration court, the Board of Immigration Appeals, overturned my case and decided to close my case.
Wow.
That's like 1 in a million.
Well,
I
want to ask you, and this, I don't want, I hope it doesn't come off the wrong way, but it's just a fact of life. You're very attractive. You're well educated. I feel bad for the people that we quote term ugly, the ugly people, the people that don't look like we want someone in society to look. So the president often talks about the people we want to be able to select those that come to the country, those that can be constructive for our nation. And I understand that. But at the same time, I'd like your take on all of that, because if you don't look like we want you to look, chances are we're not going to treat you as well as you've been treated.
That's right. And I guess at the end of the day it's, according to whom, right? It's very subjective.
That
because
is true.
At the same time, if I had a slight accent, if I didn't wear a blazer, right?
Right.
Someone might judge me in a different way. Mm-hmm. On the weekends, I'm wearing jeans and a T-shirt. would you see me the same way?
Right,
Does that mean that I'm less deserving of this opportunity because I wear I have a different look on a different day and a different occasion? If I didn't have the opportunity to have someone invest in me, because that's what happened.
Right.
I went to prep school, and then I went to Hamilton, and then I ended up at Syracuse University and got my master's degree. But that's because I had community. Not everyone has that opportunity or has access to that community. Not everyone in my circumstance who's undocumented has the chance of getting an advanced degree because they just don't have the opportunity because they're undocumented.
So how do we fix that?
So how do we fix that? That is a great question. I mean,
And how do we fix ultimately, laws are important, and we have to have a legal way of coming into the United States. There have to be laws. There has to be laws. And there are stories of people that have come over illegally and they end up raping someone. So how do we balance all this and fix it?
Well, the stories
we're looking to you now.
Who are coming, who are the criminals. Those are far and few within the whole context of the undocumented immigration, story and population of 11 million. Like I said, the majority of undocumented immigrants are individuals who overstay their visa. That's statistically speaking.
Yeah.
Then there are others who cross the border, and then within that, that population, they're criminals, yes, but I think the way that these criminals are being portrayed is that they're the majority of undocumented immigrants. That's not the case. And the other, population are asylees who, for whatever reason, their asylum applications got denied.
Yeah.
And so they end up undocumented. Now, this is an issue. All of this is an issue because as we continue to revoke programs and end programs like temporary protected status, which covers Haitians, Hondurans, Nicaraguans, they are not technically immigrants. They came through relief programs, right? And as we cancel these programs, what we do is essentially we're telling people, hey, we're going to allow you to come to America and offer you relief. And now we're going to take this relief away after you've been here for 15 years of your life. So guess what? All of those people, by the way, temporary TPS holders, 300,000, right? That program has been revoked. So now we have more opportunity. Yeah. Now we could have more undocumented immigrants.
Yeah.
DACA has been revoked. 690,000 individuals, right? We have over 100,000 cases of children in detention centers. Are they going to stay in those detention centers indefinitely? So this, as long as we keep canceling these programs and we're not offering any temporary relief, this problem worsens. So we have to start with figuring out what do we do with individuals who are here now.
Yeah.
And like I was saying, you've got a lot of individuals like myself who didn't qualify for DACA. They don't qualify for any relief. So they're just sitting here. There are over 733,000 court cases that are pending, backlogged court cases. So what that means is
how many judges? How many?
About 350 judges, right? So that means that if I have a court case around my immigration, and technically at that point I'm not undocumented yet, and I'm waiting to go through my process so I can apply for some sort of relief, but the case is backlogged, I'm going to eventually become undocumented because I'm going to, what's the term? My visa or whatever is going to expire.
Right.
This happens all the time. I know people who applied for some sort of relief, or they were of status. Their status was going to expire, so they started the application process. It took years, and now they're undocumented. So
in fear of being deported and not knowing where you're going to go, whether it might be a detention center where you'll spend who knows how long there, how do people act? What do people do? They hide? Some people hide. I guess some people do hide. They're terrified.
Right. They're terrified. Some people go public with it, but there's a huge emotional and mental health component to this because there's a level of shame that's associated with this conversation when people are pointing to you and labeling you as something. And when the entire country is your jury, they're the final arbiters of your life, not knowing your life, but deciding that you're deserving or you're not deserving. It's very hard. And then I believe, and one of the things that bothers me is that the way that we position the undocumented immigrant person is that they're either superhuman or they're subhuman. Right? They're superhuman if they got all these advanced degrees and, they graduated magna cum laude. So they deserve to stay here.
Wow, you speak so well.
And they're subhuman.
Often, so.
Exactly. Yeah. They're subhuman if they cross the border.
Yeah.
The majority of that 11 million fall in the middle. Right. We're just normal people. I didn't graduate magna cum laude. I worked hard. Mm-hmm. I'm middle class. Yeah. And so I am no different from the average American, right? But those are the people that we don't hear about in the news. Yeah. Those are my story, like people who have a similar story to me.
Well, that story, I guess your story, though, is obviously we're spending time with you here today. Martine was at Hamilton College speaking last night, was at the Refugee Center. I do think your story is one that's worth telling. But there's so many others that are going to fall into that category where it's an uninteresting story. It's not the one we're going to run with tonight at 6 o'clock. Mm-hmm. I want to ask you earlier, and I didn't get into it, and I should have, but you talked about you did your thesis on the immigration in Utica, the Refugee Center.
Yes.
And that was, you look so young. You graduated when again?
2003.
Holy cow. And so you're back there yesterday. What did you write and what did you learn and how do you compare it to what you saw yesterday?
Yes. So when I was conducting my senior thesis, the only groups that existed, refugee groups that existed back then, were Bosnians, and they were just bringing in Sudanese, refugees, and talking about how people define what an appropriate immigrant should look like. That's what I was doing. I was conducting research to understand, whereas one group being treated differently, if not better, than the other group.
And by the way, Muslim.
Exactly.
50% of them Muslim.
Absolutely. So that, it was eye-opening because, yes, they were. The Sudanese were not getting the same treatment at that point, not through the refugee center, but just in their experience in being in Utica. Yeah. That was in 2003. What I saw yesterday was just, it gave me hope because the refugee center brings in so many groups, other groups and categories of refugees from various parts of the world. And there are all these different programs to help them assimilate and acculturate, whether it's language courses, whether it's business courses, how to become an entrepreneur, how to develop your own leadership style, all of these things that are supporting them. So I think they've made tremendous progress. And I also feel that the Utica community has been much more receptive to allowing people to become part of their community. We certainly, I believe, we've got a long way to go within Utica, within the United States, but we're making progress. And just circling back to where I started in our interview and our conversation which was about kindness, right? So there are a lot of people that I want to thank everyone who has considered the possibility of letting people into their community, letting people who don't look like them into their community, and remembering that we have something in common as human beings that's not always so evident, but being open to exploring what that is.
Pretty amazing story you have. And your book is out. Can be pre-ordered right now.
Yes, you can. Illegal Among Us. And I'd love for anyone and everyone to be part of this conversation. I think this is an ongoing conversation. Yeah. And so please follow me on social media at Martine M. Kalaw or Martine Kalaw and hashtag Illegal Among Us. And you can pre-order the book today on my website.
Kalaw is spelled Kalaw.
That's right.
Martine Kalaw. So, all right. This was unbelievably interesting, and I can't think of a way to say it any better. And it's such an understatement. So awesome. Thank you so much,
It was
Martine.
a pleasure.
It was
Thank you so much.
Great having you here. We got a break.